Hey guys, this is WhytManga with a new video on 10 tips world building. Your goal here is to build a world and environment where your characters reside and where the story takes place. And you want to build a good one. So, with my experience and my own research, and I still do research on several things to improve myself as well. So it's not like I'm some perfect dude. But with my experience and the research I've done, I'd like to share 10 tips with you. With all my people, yes. My first tip on world building would be for you to try and be an inventor. Be innovative, try new techniques if necessary. And this, I know, it's kind of vague, but it really means everything, everything in the sense of that word, being innovative, to be an inventor. If your world is, especially if your world is like a fictional world, you can go crazy, baby. Do whatever you want. An example would be to look at the Harry Potter franchise. You can see there are lots of things in the that wizard witchcraft world that they don't exist in our world. It's like an alternate world where, think of yourself, you're almost God in your world. You can make whatever you want. All the rules you come up with. So if you could draw whatever and call it whatever you want and say that it has it has the ability to do whatever you want. It's all up to you, and I want you guys to know that you have that freedom. And this is always a bonus if this innovation kind of pushes the story itself. And there's another tip that ties into world building and stories and how what roles they play, and I'll get into that later in the video. But it's always going to be a big bonus if this innovation really ties into the plot or the story or whatever, and pushes it forward, and it's really used and it's easy to understand. That's another tip I'd give. That's like a bonus tip within this first tip, where everything is clear, but at the same time that kind of ties into more storytelling, and that's up to your storytelling. But the idea itself is for you to try and be innovative. The tip here is to try and make the world feel alive as much as possible. So this innovation could be technology. It could be a new rule, a rule that may not even be innovative to the world itself, but to readers, where it's a rule that's always been around for so long and is so, and maybe when that rule is broken in the comic, it's a big deal. It could rules, laws, it could be vocabulary or sayings, certain words that you're being innovative. Again, it's a small thing, but it really counts to help make the world feel alive. So you're being innovative to help the world feel unique and in its own realm. An example would be Game of Thrones, and how they have some sayings that have these meanings and history and mythology behind them, like winter is coming, or all men must die, and all that stuff, Valamo Gulis, where they're even building whole new languages, right, that only exist within that world. An example would be the Drakari. What? No. That's an actual language. The Dothraki language, right? So there's like in Game of Thrones, there's like a whole language with like a dictionary for it built. I mean, sometimes you may not need to go that route. Sometimes it's best to just stick with English or the language that is most popular within your audience. And if you get popular somewhere else with a different language, you just translate. So languages, it gets a little tricky because I think building a language is not easy. And sometimes it's not even necessary. So these are just things to keep in mind, and try to be innovative as much as you can. Some Game of Thrones, sticking with Game of Thrones, when you go to the Night's Watch, they have like an anthem, or they swear an oath, and the oath has like actual words, like a saying. You could have that in your unique fictional world. Even I do in Apple Black, which we'll get to. But all these things help bring the world to life. If there's like a unique salute, if you go to Attack on Titan, there's a unique way to salute. In Apple Black, there's a unique way to salute. Or even going back to languages, it could be like a sign language. It's just for you to open your mind and do crazy things and have things that stick out, make the world feel a little more unique, make it feel alive. One example that comes to mind with Apple Black is the whole idea of wands with wizards. And with Apple Black, I'm more, from like a branding standpoint, I'm more sticking with the word sorcerer and sorceresses. and stuff like that. I rarely use the word wizard, or never really. But usually they're associated with wands, and in Apple Black, wands are kind of different. A wand could really be anything that it's kind of blessed by the god of sorcery and stuff like that, and you can use the wand in battles and in really unique, innovative ways. So somebody's wand could be his glasses, somebody's wand could be a cigarette, somebody's wand could be an actual blade, whether it's samurai looking katana blade, or ancient British medieval sword kind of looking thing. Or the wand could be, literally, it could be anything. It could be a pair of gloves, it could be a necklace, it could be strings, it could be a guitar, it could be it's almost limitless, and this way I can come up with like really unique weapons for people, and really unique rules and battle scenarios and things like that, and it allows me to do some cool stuff, which will get cooler as the series goes on. So for those who don't know me, I'm the creator of Apple Black. You can read the first 4 chapters free on Saturday AM. I'll leave a link to that in the description below, or you can purchase Volume 1, which has the first chapters for the first chapters 1 to 9 in Volume 1. I'll leave a link to where you can purchase that as well. If you don't know what Saturday AM is, a quick summary would be to say it's similar to like a Shonen Jump. So if you know what that is, then it's just like an anthology that has several comics featured within the digital magazine. That's what it is. Saturday AM is a digital magazine. And if you want to learn more about Saturday AM, I have a link in the description as well. Anything you would possibly need from me to learn more about me, my project, Saturday AM, WhytManga, YouTube, my social media, it's in the link below. Check it out. If you want to check out Saturday AM issue 53 for free, that rhymed, you can just shoot me a message, not like a post on my wall or a comment, but shoot me an actual message on my Facebook page. Links in the description as well. You can go to the Facebook page, like the Facebook page. You must be subscribed to this channel, and you must like this video. And when you send me a message on my Facebook, I'll send you the codes and the link that you should go to get issue 53 for those who are interested in how Saturday AM looks on the insides, and you can see all the goodies and all the great comics in there as well. Now the second tip, and really all the other tips that come after this, still tie into the first tip, which is being innovative and making this world feel alive, which is the goal, right? Is trying to figure out how the world works, how the system works. Well, what's the culture like? What are the people like? What they believe in? How do they operate? Well, how do they dress? What do they eat? How do they greet? Right? What are the accessories that they wear that is kind of like you can recognize it each time? That's why if you design a character in Bleach and you design people can, even if it's like a Bleach OC, people can kind of tell, even though your drawing style is different, people can kind of tell that this character resides in that particular world. Same thing for Naruto, same thing for any other series out there. I only use those two because they're really popular titles, but and there's sometimes it can overlap where you have a character that could appear in a different series, which is fine. But generally, the goal here is up to you how unique you want to be. But the goal here is to figure out what your world is and how it operates, what they wear, what they dress, how they dress, how they eat, greet, accessories, what the traditions, what their beliefs. It could be like what they worship. Do they worship one thing or several things? Are there like several deities there? And how does the government operate? Are there rebels that are against certain religions or the government itself, or figuring out all that? And one way to do that, it would be to kind of gain you can take experience from your actual lives, or do some research on other cultures and other traditions and find ways to mix and match and come up with something new. And most times in best cases, usually you already have an idea of what you want to do, and then you mix it with something else and it becomes a little more original, and put that together. But these are the things you need to do a lot of research in to figure out how things work. If you're going to go with figuring out how that government works, how does the government work? Is it like an organized government? Is it a good government, a bad one? Does it deal with slavery? Is it a dictatorship? Is it a democracy, oligarchy, all that stuff? You need to figure it out, figure out the hierarchy within the governments, and how orders get trickled down to the lowest level from the highest level. figuring out how the rich get rich, why they're rich, how did it all start, figuring everything out. And these things don't have much to do, they might not have anything to do with your actual story, which again, I'll get into that, how, world building and stories tie in together. But is you figuring out how everything works. If it's slavery, how did it start? Why does it continue? How does the rich get rich? How do the poor get poor? If is it even that kind of society, or is it a society where everyone kind of knows their role and there isn't any poor person or any rich person? Everyone's kind of on the same level, and maybe there's just one, or they're controlled by robots. It's up to you, but it's up to you to figure out, right? And take all these things out and understand your world, almost immerse yourself in that world and figure out how it works. How does how money is spent. Sometimes you see series where the currency has its own name, has its own look, has its own value, and those are things you can play with. Sometimes the most interesting cultures or systems and settings are kind of remixes, or you mix and like when you mix and match two different ones, and you take things you like from A and things you like from B to completely come up with something new. And all that could begin with one idea, or a combination of two. So for instance, One Piece mainly focuses on pirates, right? So you kind of, everything you know about pirates and all the things you can add to pirates, all the animes that came before One Piece, drawing inspiration from that, and taking that idea of what a pirate is and what a pirate isn't, you kind of mix it and come up with something new. A popular thing to say would be like Naruto being a combination with like the world of like Harry Potter and ninjas, and having that in mind to build whatever you're building. And you can gain inspiration from how the systems work in, say, a Harry Potter, and how the systems work in, say, ancient ninja movies and stuff like that. So you have a lot of wiggle room and a lot of freeway to come up with something completely new. Again, this ties into the first tip about being an inventor, having that mindset of being an innovative person. Again, third tip, piggybacking off the second tip, would be the infrastructure itself, the actual design of the way things look. How does transportation, being part of that system, how does the transportation look? The look is also important. So transportation, communication, you see like One Piece, they have like snails. Sometimes they use like snails or things that look like snails for communication. In Apple Black, sometimes I have like very weird looking flowers that do these kind of stuff. But the infrastructure of the buildings, these are also things like having your world, that world having a signature look. And sometimes you might have several worlds within one big universe, and each world has its own unique look. You can do things like that as well. But those are things to think about. An example would be something you guys can research would be to look at shows like Flintstones or the Jetsons, and see how the world operates, communication, transportation, and all that stuff. How does it actually work? How does it look? And you can, have a theme, and you kind of stick to it for the most part to create. The fourth tip would be to find ways to explain this world. Some people, I see some series where they just flat out explain the setting of the world in the beginning before they dive into it, or to whatever story it is. I see cases where they find creative ways within the series to explain the world, where they're not directly explaining it to you like direct exposition, but you can kind of tell as the story goes on, the world is unraveling, right? And that's one way to do it. But basically, find a way to explain and have the explanations yourself, even if you're not explaining at the time. But it's always good to have like the mythology of this world, the lore of the world, the history, how things came to be, and what history do the people know, which history is actually accurate. All the stories, prophecies, are the prophecies that maybe some prophets or religious people within this world, they believe and they preach, and figuring all that stuff out. And most of it kind of ties into history. All that religion stuff kind of ties into it. So basically, you're building your lore, and sticking with it. sometimes the mythology, the history, the lore help drive the story in certain ways. It kind of helps you plot out all those key points to create your story as you move forward. And they also, from a franchise perspective, sometimes they could have stories within themselves that could go on to be their own shows or be their own whatever. So again, another example would be Game of Thrones, where you have this R plus L equals J thing, or yeah, R plus L equals J thing, which is, I don't want to spoil it for people, for those who haven't watched the show, but basically there was an event that happened earlier in the series that the show never actually shows. They just talk about it and they keep talking about it, and that's kind of like part of the lore of the story. And if people want to create another series that focuses on that time period, that early time period within the same Game of Thrones universe, they can do that. So from a franchise perspective, it's always cool to have interesting lore, interesting backstories for your characters, interesting history between the characters, or between gods within that world, or whatever, right? It's always cool to have stuff like that. Fifth tip would be to keep in mind of the diversity in the world, how the people look, not just from a clothing standpoint, but from ethnicity and race, and figuring out how that plays a role in your story. Is your world kind of broken into countries and continents like the real world, where there are some places that are more diverse than other places, obviously, and you maybe want to keep that in mind. Or you're just diverse to be diverse, because from a marketing standpoint, it's always good to be diverse and having diverse characters, ethnicity, or size wise, or race wise, whether you have an alien or a dog in a samurai costume, or a fox in a samurai costume, to be more accurate. Some of you know what I'm talking about. But diversity in on all fronts always makes your story look even more unique and make it look cool. And if it ties into the story itself and has a reason to be there, that's a big bonus. And again, when you have diverse characters where maybe it's even a fictional kind of ethnicity or a fictional race or things like that, that can also have its own lore and history and mythology that could be its own thing one day. So that's one thing to keep in mind. If you're going to try and depict an ethnicity that maybe currently exists in this world, it's always good to do research, and maybe the research and the things you learn from your research would help your input in building that ethnicity and how it's going to look. Or it could just be a straight copy. I mean, if your story takes place in Hawaii, it would be nice to kind of study or do some research about the people that reside in that area to give your work more authenticity. So sometimes it's just straight up copying, but if it's like a fictional world and you want that maybe tribe or clan to be inspired by that, it's always great to have to do research, and that'll kind of feed into the building of the actual tribe or ethnicity and help everything feel more alive and have more effective diversity. The sixth tip is what I've been shouting the whole time. It would be research, right? Research other shows, research actual history. Again, I named shows like One Piece, Naruto, Flintstones, Jetsons, maybe One Punch Man, Kill la Kill, Bleach, Harry Potter, Game of Thrones, etc. Real life. Sometimes you might want, again, your actual experience. So that's not necessarily research, but maybe you're taking from experience, or you can actually do research and come up with a world that's almost like an alternate world, almost like a what if scenario. One of my favorite settings was like a Gintama, that's basically Asian Japan if aliens came, and then they have like fun adventures, and it's more complicated than that. But I'll leave it to those who are interested in it. I think Gintama is easily my favorite comedic action show, anime, manga thing. Whatever I'm saying, but you get my point. Is kind of like a what if scenario. That's also, again, going back to the second tip of coming up with that system and being the first tip of being innovative. That's kind of like a what if scenario. That's kind of like a remix of like sci-fi alien stuff and like Asian Japan, and just having it, it's an alternate universe of is an alternate universe / a simulation of what would have happened if aliens came in Asian Japan, and kind of you know, there's like maybe peace and everyone's kind of living in that world in peace, kind of, sort of. Again, I don't want to spoil too much about Gintama. It's like the sixth tip is saying, do research, and sometimes you can get inspiration and influence from all these worlds and get a good understanding of how they operate, and it'll help you figure out how you want to create what you want to do. The seventh tip would be, you may not want to be too monotone. You know, you can have worlds that, you know, where everyone in that maybe country or island kind of has the same belief or behaves the same way, you know, because maybe they're unimportant or whatever. But one way to really bring places, especially if they're fictional and stuff like that, to life, not even especially if they're fictional, just good storytelling sometimes, and just judging from the world we actually live in, people don't always agree with each other. So to echo the real world, if that's what you want to do, you know, sometimes the history, like I said, the history you've built, the lore you've built, the ideologies, philosophies, laws, you know, things like that, they get challenged. So it's not every people don't always believe the same thing. There's always some kind of conflict, and that conflict sometimes can drive your story. So currently in Apple Black, right, there is a system in place, right, and there are certain rebels that don't agree with that system, and sometimes there might be people that just don't agree with the system. They might not necessarily be rebels or you know, bad guys in quotations, but there is conflict there. There's conflict in belief. There's conflict in religion, even in the real world. There's conflict in politics, where, you know, you're not necessarily a bad person because you disagree with my ideologies, but that disagreement exists. So sometimes you want to keep that in mind when you're creating your world, and not having it be too monotone where everyone kind of moves in one direction. People are not robots, basically. And hell, sometimes robots aren't robots, if you know what I mean. The eighth tip would be to take into account the technology or magic or science or whatever you've created in this world, whatever innovation you've come up with. Kind of make sure it makes sense in the actual world and it's logical, and it must be clear how it affects the world. So for instance, I mean, if you created a world where, say, everyone could fly, that's just it, right? Everybody in that world could fly, then it wouldn't make sense for airplanes to exist, right? Or if airplanes did exist, then at least have like a good reason why it still does, or why anyone would want to take it. Or maybe there's an illness going around, or there's an illness that stops your ability of flight temporarily, so you'd have to use a plane. Or maybe that's an opportunity to be innovative and not create a plane and create something else that's unique looking, you know, that can help transportation wise. But if you build a world where everyone can fly, then, you know, it affects things. It affects transportation, it affects communication, it affects a whole bunch of stuff. So you kind of take into account for the changes in how your innovations, technology, magic, science, whatever, what rules, the laws you've created, how they affect the world you currently live in. Like if weed and prostitution were legal today, shit will change. Something will change. You can't even go into great detail about what will change, but something's going to change. Things are not going to be the same. You know what I mean? So, kind of drastic example there, but I'm sure you guys get the gist. The ninth tip would be geography, kind of like size. This is where you kind of want to play with maybe your maps. You want to design your maps and how it looks. It can also influence how maybe when you're trying to visualize your world, how the world will actually look. So if the main characters, antagonist, protagonist, or whatever the current arc in the story takes place in a certain town, and maybe that town's an island, there's certain ways an island is supposed to look because it's an island. So those are things to play around with. You can also design all the other places, even if you don't visit those, say, countries or towns or villages or whatever. It can add to your lore and mythology and just background story of the whole universe, you know, as well. And sometimes that can push your story. Sometimes it could be like foreshadowing, where the characters keep mentioning a certain place, and at some point in the story that place becomes important because maybe the characters are heading that way. Or if an example would be, say, if the prison was a big bad prison, and maybe all the bad guys keep getting sent there arc after arc. If the main character now has to go to that prison, right, because people, your audience kind of knows at least the name of the prison, right, they've always wanted to go there. It's adding some hype to the story, is adding some value to the story. If it's like a big bad prison and maybe a good character is wrongfully accused and being sent there, and people care about the character, then it adds to your story. Example would be Batman. They keep talking about Arkham Asylum, Arkham Asylum, Arkham Asylum. So for the times where they don't show Arkham Asylum, if so, the time when the time comes to actually go there, it's a big deal. Or say if we're using like popular shonen manga with like say Bleach, where they go to or they go to Soul Society, where they kind of, there's like subtle foreshadowing here and there about Soul Society. So when you actually get to the Soul Society, we're kind of excited of this about this new world that we just hopped into. So there are lots of ways to play around with it, and ways where it can assist your story and push it forward. Again, there are a lot of, is you doing a lot of research, and maybe you'll be able to come up with cool designs, cool unique theme designs for your world, the world that you're coming up with, or this map you're trying to put together, and figuring out how all the towns and all the countries and all the continents kind of come together, if necessary, if that's what you're going for. And if your world takes place on Earth modern day, then you wouldn't need most of this stuff. Is stuff to keep in mind. These are tips that not all these tips, if you take all these tips, doesn't mean your world's going to be perfect. You still need to kind of keep in mind what kind of world you're building in your head, and kind of pick and choose, mix and match the tips that you're hearing from me, and maybe even do more research to get more tips from other people, to really build a solid foundation of your world. And the last tip would be to remember that the world assists the story, and not vice versa. Like the action and dialogue pushes the story forward, not the exposition, right? It's the same. It's kind of like the same thing. So when you're this world building, the reason we're doing it is to help the world feel alive. If the world feels alive, it helps your story feel alive. It helps people feel more immersed into that world, to journey along with your characters. So keep in mind that the story, world building is important, but it's usually never really as important as the story itself. So, for example, going back to Gintama, yes, the world is established, right? And a bonus tip here is to make sure your world is established in some way at some point, where people get a good idea of where the characters reside. But the world in Gintama is established, right? It's the ancient Japan with a bunch of aliens, and they kind of run the government a little bit. They have some kind of treaty with humans, but with the shogun, but whatever, right? The world is established, but sometimes that's not the story. Sometimes the story has nothing to do with the world they live in. Sometimes it does, but in those cases, it's cases where the world kind of pushes the story forward. Maybe there was someone that betrayed them, and that's why humans made a deal with aliens, and it's not a fair deal, but whatever. Why the deal was passed in the first place, and so there's that personal beef there. I'm not saying this is the case. I'm just giving an example. And sometimes there are episodes where it's just a comedic show. It's just a show. It's just a story that takes place in that world, and things in that world help assist here and there. But it's more about the story and less about the world. 9 times out of 10, if not 10 times out of 10. So that's it, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed all 10 tips and all the little bonus ones in between on how to build your world for your story. 10 tips on world building. Again, for those who don't know me, I'm the creator of Apple Black. Links to everything you could possibly need in the descriptions below. Please do not forget to like this video, share this video if you like it, leave a comment if you have specific questions you want me to answer, or any questions at all. You can leave in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. A lot of you do that. A lot of you do all the things I ask, and I really appreciate it. Lots of you have purchased Apple Black Volume 1. I really appreciate it a great deal. You guys have no idea. Apple Black Volume 2 is coming out real soon. So again, I'd like to thank you guys for the ongoing support. We just hit 60,000 subscribers, so this channel is kind of moving in the right direction. and I'm really grateful for all the support I've gotten so far. And I will continue to pop out videos for you guys. Again, don't forget to subscribe, share, like, and all the good stuff. If you watch this video to the end, that also helps. Thank you very much. This is WhytManga, and I'm out.